Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Kim, and recently someone asked me what are my thoughts on supporting AAPI students who are English language learners, sometimes referred to as EL, or sometimes plurilingual. Let me begin with asking a question. If a student comes into your school, what would be the attitude of the typical educator if the student, let's say, had limited English proficiency? Would it be like, oh man, how am I gonna make this work? Or is it going to be like, wow, I have so many tools in the toolkit that I can use to support that student. I'm so excited to have that student in my class. It's going to be an added value. My guess is that most schools have teachers that are CLAD certified to teach English language learners through the credentialing program. This is something we provide in California. Not as many are B-CLAD certified, so they might be bilingual. If I were to make a recommendation to HRs, I would say like putting a preference actually on hiring B-CLAD credentialed because these are folks that definitely know how to tap into the plurilingual strengths of students. And that kind of brings me to the 3 points. What are the 3 things to look at? The first would be like tapping into the funds of knowledge of the students, like having that cultural empathy. Second would be toolkit of strategies. And third would be stewarding funding to strengthen capacity. So let's go to point number 1. Louise Mall, a researcher, Dr. Louise Mall said, that students just don't come in as like empty vessels, but they have funds of knowledge. Their parents have funds of knowledge, and so oftentimes maybe the teacher doesn't know what those funds of knowledge are, but the student is coming in with something, and so are the parents. So how is language and culture and story viewed as an asset? So an asset-based teacher, one who is able to tap into the funds of knowledge, is going to really be able to, draw out those opportunities and stories to benefit that student, but not just that student, all the rest of the students in the class as well. Once again, when we pave the way for the student with the greatest needs, it oftentimes also paves the way for the students for all the students actually. Sometimes like you'll see situations where it seems as though there's not a lot of parent interest, so parent participation is low. And I don't think that's like a lack of interest. I think sometimes parents are just surviving. Sometimes that's the case for a lot of our plurilingual students. But secondly, sometimes there are barriers for parents to feel comfortable at school. So I think if you're not having a lot of parent participation, I think it's important to kind of look at like what are the barriers that make it difficult for parents to participate. Because I'm just thinking about the Korean American community, for example. Like I know that, for example, they're very involved in like civic engagement through churches, right? Lots of engagement, lots of volunteering, lots of serving, lots of participation. So if you have lots of participation here, but then not a lot of participation here, you got to ask like, what are the barriers, and is there anything that can be done to mitigate some of those barriers to get that parent participation? Because we know that one of the most powerful indicators to support student achievement is parent involvement in schools. So what can schools do then to increase this parent involvement if we know that parents are engaged and supportive and involved in the community, but for some reason not as much at the school? That's a big question to ask, right? Second point is the idea of having a toolkit. So like, let's say I was that teacher or another teacher that had that student come in who kind of struggled, with limited English proficiency. Would that teacher have a large toolkit to support that English language learner? Because this is not for a lack of effort. Every teacher is going to be like giving so much effort, but it really helps to have that toolkit. When I say toolkit, I'm talking about strategies that support plurilingual students and all students. Some examples include, and I'm taking it from Radically Inclusive Teaching with Newcomer and Emergent Plurilingual Students, Braving Up. This is a book, that's a book, but they talk about a lot of different strategies like identity and art, picture books, content mapping and copies, poetry, amplifying student voice, community building, online discussions, sentence frames, project-based learning. So those are all different kinds of strategies that teachers can have in their toolkit so that when they have a student who is in greater need for those particular strategies, or lectures not just going to work, they're going to have a big toolkit to draw from. I know as a adjunct professor at Vanguard University in the teacher preparation program, that's something that I do. I want the students to definitely be equipped with a lot of different tools, and so we actually cover a lot of these strategies in schools of education, and maybe that would be another side point of having schools of education, having their folks equipped with many strategies and actually have them curated in like a website or some type of format so they can go back to that toolkit, so it's not just some class that they took a long time ago, and actually have like a mock conference where they are the educational leaders. So just imagining that they were entering a new school, that they can not only be proficient themselves, but be teacher leaders themselves, which would be awesome, right? Um, and the third point is the stewarding of funding to strengthen that capacity. And so some of this opportunity for students to be plurilingual requires some funding and stewardship, including like dual language immersion programs or Saturday academies, or paying extra educators to be mentors to students, or the Gabe conference where they're looking at some promising practices. Once again saying, hey, this is important, so we're going to really make it intentional and we're going to prioritize some of our funding. So those are my three thoughts. Once again, I feel like when you emphasize those three thoughts, tapping into the funds of knowledge, having a toolkit of strategies, and stewarding the funding, it really grows that cultural empathy as well, which once again will benefit that AAPI plurilingual child, their family, but not just that group, but others who also see that love and compassion and wisdom that the school displays toward that student.